Company culture is always tied to the leadership in so many ways, and leaders themselves have to choose what their culture will be. I mean, that's the freedom of being a business owner or starting a company in your own image, I suppose. And I know that with the Walt Disney Company, Walt was all about connecting with people, so he made sure that the values of the company reflected his own personal values. And I think that's a challenge many leaders have, is they have their own values, but how do they convey those to employees? So certainly having the values and knowing in your mind what your culture should be is one thing, but as you ask, how do you convey that to your employees, your vendors, people with whom you work? And usually it's how you behave, what words you use, and your approach with your employees. So I always, when I talk with my clients and my leaders that I work with, is I will say, you have published values, you have published mission statements and vision statements, but do your words you choose to use reflect those values? Do your actions reflect those values? Does your tone of voice reflect those values? Because everyone looks at the leader and how he or she says what they say, what he or she says and how they say it, and their actions all send a strong message to employees. This is what I expect from you. Certainly, well, as I mentioned in the last answer, the way that leaders act, how they treat their employees, how they treat their vendors, how they treat their customers is an indication of what they truly believe. So the way they can harm their culture is if, for example, they say that as a value, we appreciate honesty. But if an employee approaches a leader with honest feedback that may be slightly critical of that leader or of the company, and the leader gets upset and says, "I don't want to hear that," then you know the message is very strong that the value of honesty really isn't that important. That's a really good question, and a healthy culture is one that all employees understand. I think even better is when customers understand it, and when leadership changes. If and when leadership changes, the culture should stay alive. So I would say that a strong culture is one that transcends leadership changes. A strong culture actually survives some of the challenges that all of us have faced worldwide in the last 2 years with the COVID pandemic, is that you remain true to your values. Leaders know that they have a healthy organizational culture when they see their employees acting and behaving as they, the leaders, originally envisioned their company. That means that the employees have learned carefully what the culture is. And if there is a connection between leadership, middle management, and frontline employees, and they are all in sync, if they're all congruent, then that equates a healthy culture that has been communicated effectively from leadership. In trying times like this, in trying times forever, leaders have to live the concepts despite the challenges. Leaders have to give examples of how they will overcome the challenges. They have to, using a phrase, walk the talk. So if a challenging time means we have to be more creative, then a leader should get in front of her or his people and demonstrate creativity. If a leader wants people to be more introspective and really think about how they themselves can improve, I'll give you an example. Recently I did a job with a leader who wanted his employees to be more resilient and to improve their communication style. And before he made that demand of them, he got in front of 400, 500 of his employees and said, we all need to be better communicators. And that starts with me. And he gave 3 or 4 examples of where he was a less than effective communicator. And he vowed right then and there in front of his employees to work on reducing those communication challenges that he himself had. And that became a tremendous, powerful role model that his employees saw, and then they believed him by saying, this is interesting. Our leader realizes he has some improvement to make, and now he's asking me as an employee to make improvements. So since he's willing to do it, so am I. Correlation between employee loyalty and customer loyalty. I think it's all about how we treat people. And if employees feel like they are respected, if employees feel like they have a voice, if employees feel like they have been empowered, then they step up and take care of customer problems more rapidly and to the customer satisfaction compared to the competition. So if a employee feels empowered and they can solve customers' problems, if a employee feels respected and when they go to work, they exude comfort with the client, the patient, the customer, then customers can feel that distinction. Now, certainly, if your product line is old and tired, if your product pricing is completely out of touch with what the competition is doing, then even that human connection may not be enough. But assuming your product is up to date, your pricing is within reason of what it should be, then if you have employees who feel respected, who are empowered, they will convey that to their customers, and customers will actually enjoy doing business with you. Leaders foster cultures of innovation and customer service by constantly challenging themselves and making examples of themselves of how they can be even stronger. Leaders that ask their employees for input and advice on how do we improve our product. Leaders that ask their customers and clients for advice on how do we improve our product and then act upon it. Now, it doesn't mean that all of the advice you follow. Some examples you get from customers or employees you may not want to use. But for those customers that give you feedback you act upon, then I would suggest marketing that and saying, this is the feedback we got from 95% of our customers and we're acting upon that and we're giving you what you want. The same thing with employees. If you take an employee survey and you ask employees, how could we improve? And you act upon that, then employees will be motivated because they know you listened and you acted upon that. On the flip side, so many organizations take employee surveys and do nothing. Already they have made a problem because simply by taking an employee survey, you've raised expectations of employees that something is going to change. But if you ask a question, how do we improve, and then you do nothing and you don't acknowledge the questions, then most likely you will be lower on the morale scale than even before you asked the questions in the employee survey. I think trust is huge for innovation and customer service, and leaders and supervisors and managers have to exhibit trust in their employees. I know you can do the job. I'm going to coach you on how to get the job done. Absent trust. Without trust, nothing works. And a lot of organizations where I have worked as a consultant around the world have, for example, world-class headquarter buildings. They have world-class training programs, but there's a sense of unease, a sense of I'm not trusted. And when there is that sense of distrust, generally speaking, an organization is not going to do very well. So I would say first and foremost, you have to instill the feeling of trust. Well, it kind of is a summary of all the things we've just now talked about is lead by example. For example, if a leader says customers are number one, but never asks the customer for their feedback. If a leader says customers are number one and never asks employees for their feedback, that feeling of connectivity is gone. But if an owner or a leader says, we need to know what our customers think, and that leader or that owner visits customer facilities. Let's say you're an attorney, and for no fee at all, you visit your client's business. Maybe your client manufactures cars, and you say to yourself, I am the owner of this law firm. I need to know more about my client that builds automobiles or builds batteries or builds medical beds. And I'm going to go visit the factory. I'm going to go visit the hospital completely free of charge so I can learn directly from my clients what they like about our business and what they dislike. The same thing for leaders who, what I say in my presentations, walk the park, just like Walt Disney did. They visit the front lines, they interact with employees, they interact with customers, and face-to-face gather data. That sends a really powerful message that I, as the owner or as the leader, am interested in trust, in innovation and customer service, and I am in the front lines every day gathering it. Empowerment, in my opinion, always boils down to two factors. As I mentioned earlier, trust. You have to have a trusting environment, and it's about development and training. So if my employees trust me that I am going to encourage them to try new things and they're not going to get in trouble if they try new things, if they trust me, and if I and my team offer employees training on how to improve our ability to solve problems, then that usually encourages employees to say, I trust her, I trust him, and I learn some new skills so that I can solve customer problems. I can recover when service doesn't go as well as planned. Then you're going to have more employees who can solve problems immediately, as opposed to having to call a supervisor or a manager, and it takes a lot longer to solve those problems. So to answer your question, trust plus training equals empowerment. A culture of significance is my way of saying a healthy culture. A culture that can overcome challenges, a culture that is strong enough to transcend the difficulties that we face with whether it's competition or things that we cannot predict, such as the pandemic that we've all recently had to deal with. So a significant culture is resilient. A significant culture is one where all of the values are lived and breathed and acted upon every day by every member of that organization. Cultural barriers to creating a culture of significance is always when there is a disconnect between what leadership says and what the value statement says and their actions. If the actions of a leader are opposite of what the posted values are or the publicized mission and vision statements are, then employees will say, all of the signs in our office say integrity, honesty, customer service, safety, but if they see their leadership team acting the opposite of that and nothing is changing, then most employees will say, don't trust what you hear, just be very careful, and as soon as you have the opportunity, leave the company. a significant culture is kind of like a life raft in times of uncertainty. What I've seen in the last couple of years with organizations that have survived, maybe not thrived, but survived during the pandemic, are the ones where owners and leaders have vowed to support their employees. Maybe through other kinds of work. Maybe their core business is no longer available, but the owners and the senior leaders of the company maintain their employee base by offering jobs elsewhere. Or even if they have to lay off employees temporarily, perhaps they maintain some of their employee benefits. Or even the leadership says, if we are all going to take a 50% or 60% cut in pay, I'm going to take a 90% cut in pay so that we can all maintain our jobs. So again, it's actions always speak louder than words, and a culture of significance will actually be a much more resilient, safe zone for employees. Disney University's main messages about customer loyalty are really the messages from Walt Disney. Disney University is kind of like the cultural Jiminy Cricket of Disney. Jiminy Cricket meaning Jiminy Cricket was to Pinocchio the conscience of the organization. And so Disney University is tasked with not only training and developing employees, but perpetuating the values of Walt Disney and many of the men and women who helped start the Disney organization. So it's far more than a training division or a training opportunity. It's a mirror of the organizational values, and it perpetuates those, whether it's in the United States or any of the countries in which the company operates. And it shows flexibility by honoring the cultures in which the company is operating, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in France, whether it's in Hong Kong, mainland China, whether it's in California, Florida. It shows flexibility in how to interact with employees from all these different cultures.